Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff Besson with Intuilab. I'll be your host for this webinar. It's my opportunity to introduce you to Intuiface. I love this webinar. I love this product. And my goal ultimately is to make you fall in love too. And maybe to dispel a couple of possible misconceptions that you may have. I see this on occasion. The first is that Intuiface is hard. Maybe it's a developer tool. I'm not a developer. I only use PowerPoint. It is not hard. In fact, we put intuitive in the name of the product for a reason. This product is not hard to use. It does a lot, and you weren't born with the skill of using Intuiface, so it'll take a little bit of time. But I absolutely believe this thing is easy, and I hope that after this webinar, this demonstration, you'll feel the same way. The other misconception is not that it's hard, but that it's really just about building slides. You know, it's PowerPoint with touch. It's far more than that. In fact, under certain circumstances, we call it application creation. We certainly don't call it presentation creation because it's far more than bullet points on a slide, and I hope to make that point to you as well. You can build pretty much any design you want. It's your layout, it's your storyboard, it's your content, it's anything. Okay? So between my absolute passion for Intuiface and I think a very good product, you'll be very encouraged and very excited to use it by the end of this demonstration. If you look at your screen right now, you can see multiple experiences built using Intuiface. This is portrait orientation, this is landscaping. You'll notice as I reveal all of these different experiences, they're completely different. They're not just different conceptually, they're not just different verticals. Here's digital signage, here's make your own burger, here's a museum exhibit. Not only are they conceptually different, but every pixel is different. They're not sharing the same kind of layout, they're not all based on the same template, they're completely different. And this is a very important point. You literally control every single pixel of your design. You do not buy pre-built templates from us. You do not buy pre-built applications from us. You create any kind of experience for any audience using your own content. That should be exciting. At the end of the day, what Intuiface enables you to do is realize your vision. The vision is yours. So if you have great concepts and are motivated, you can build just about anything you want. It's really amazing. Let's look at the products in the Intuiface family. Composer is the editor. It's the tool you use to create your interactive content. It runs on Windows. It only runs on Windows. About 15% of our users are on a Mac. Half of our development team is on a Mac, but they're running Windows on a Mac using something like Parallels as virtualization software or Bootcamp to run Windows natively. But you're using Composer to create your interactive experiences. You use Player to run those interactive experiences. You build it with Composer, you run it with Player. You build it in Composer on Windows, you run it in Player on 6 operating systems. Windows, of course, but also Chrome, iPad, Android devices, Samsung Smart Signage Platform, and the LG WebOS Smart Signage Platform. Build on Windows, run on any of 6 operating systems. It's possible that you may need only one Composer, but 1,000 players because you have 1,000 devices in the field running the content you build with Composer. So there's no relation in terms of license count. It could be one Composer, multiple players. So you build with Composer, you run with Player, and then you use Management Console to facilitate things like sharing with colleagues and clients, deploying to remote devices, accessing information collected about what users are doing on that screen, a variety of things. Management Console lives in the cloud. Composer is installed on the device. Player is installed on the device. Management Console is a website, a set of websites that you can access from anywhere. Okay? Now, from a licensing perspective, everything I'm going to tell you in this webinar you can do for free, with a couple of exceptions, but they're small exceptions and they're not going to prevent you from trying 100% of Intuiface's design capabilities without buying a license. Everything Composer can do from a design perspective you can do without buying a license. There's no reason to buy Intuiface unless you're convinced you can build what you need. Okay? But there are licenses that you can purchase for Composer. Same thing goes for Player. Management Console doesn't have licenses. It's features are tiered based on what you have for Composer. Okay. Now, I'm not looking to make you guys a pricing expert either. Okay, so the combinations of editions and this sort of thing, I just want to make sure you're aware that there are 3 editions of Composer. If you've ever been to the pricing page on our website, then our prices are there. We don't hide it. We don't force you to call us. They're right there. You can, model costs. You're going to see 3 editions of Composer. Again, everything I show you, with a couple of exceptions, you can do with the free edition, and the things you can't do, it doesn't prevent you from building anything you want. Okay. Essentially, what we restrict with the free edition is playback. There are some limitations on the playback side. On the design side, 100%. That's it. That's the whole preamble. Nice and short. Now, as we jump into the details, if you have any questions, I can't hear you, but my colleague Seb Meunier is managing this webinar, and you can use the GoToWebinar toolbar to ask questions. So at any time, feel free to jump in, ask a question. Seb will answer them. And at the end of this webinar, we can also answer some of your questions live. All right, so you can type them in. Seb can answer them on the fly, or we'll get to you live at the end of the webinar. All right, let's do the demo. I'm running Composer. From a demo perspective, there's really not much to show you in Player. Player runs stuff, so there's nothing really to see. Composer is where the magic happens, so that's where we do the demonstration. And right now you're looking at one of the scenes in my experience. You'll note that I use this drop-down list to pick the scene I want to edit. There are multiple scenes in this experience. That's what this drop-down allows me to do, is to look at all the scenes in my experience. You could think of scenes as slides. We call them scenes partly because we want to make sure you don't confuse it with some of the restrictions of a traditional slide. So for example, when you're building a slide presentation, typically the order of those slides matter. Slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. In fact, very often you number slides. In Intuiface, it's very unlikely you're going to number a scene. And that's because often, because it's interactive, the path your users will take through your content might be all over the place. Under the covers, they might go from a table of contents on scene 1 to information on scene 50. Do they need to know they're on scene 50? Yeah, probably not. You're not numbering those things. So the order experienced by the user could be all over the place. Under the covers, the order might matter. As the designer, this might be highly relevant to you, and so you can reorder in this list through drag and drop. You can create what we call sequences. You can organize logically some scenes so that they're related to each other from a design perspective. But from the end user perspective, do they know they're on a new scene? Do they know what scene they're on? Unlikely. You can choose to do that, but by and large, when using our product, that's not what happens. Okay. This is the scene I've selected. This is where I would be editing my content. Sequences, that's that notion of grouping scenes in the scenes panel. Let's talk about layers briefly. If I click this button in the blue ribbon up top, it opens the scene structure panel. This tells me what's inside the scene I'm currently editing. It's a one-to-one relationship. If I click the logo in the scene structure panel, it's highlighted here in the scene. If I click the title in the scene, that text asset is highlighted in the scene structure panel. It's a one-to-one. And by the way, even if this item is hidden, which you can do in Intuiface, you can hide things and choose when to show them, they'll still be listed in the scene structure panel. This is not about whether they're visible. This is an inventory of everything that's in the scene. The text asset is in the middle layer. The image asset is in the back layer. Front, middle, back. That refers to the order in and out of the screen. Everything in the front layer will always be in front of items in the middle layer. Items in the middle layer will always be in front of items in the back. This ability to control the Z order, the Z axis, enables you to control visuals, right? Everybody gets X and Y coordinates and why that's important for a layout, but when something is interactive, you also need to care about that Z axis. What's in front of what? And these layers allow you to control it. Within a given layer, the Z order is determined by what you interact with last. Now, if I have something that's static, it's always in the back of its layer. I can make an image static, which means you're not supposed to interact with it. It's in the back of that layer automatically. Anything that's meant to be interactive will jump in front of the layer it's in. So there are 3 layers. You can choose either one and organize content appropriately. That's it, scene layer and sequence experts. Let's go to the next subject, which is assets and collections. Assets, that's the visual and auditory content you're using to create your designs. That's your stuff. Let me start with something simple. I'll jump into File Explorer and grab a movie poster for Beetlejuice. I like the movie Beetlejuice. By the way, if any of you have done the tutorial, it's the same material, it's the same subject matter. It's Tim Burton. He makes good movie posters. So here we are in my scene. This is a what you see is what you get editor. So in this case, I'm using my mouse to manipulate this image as much as I wish. And then if I push play, see the play button? That runs an embedded version of Player. So I can test my work. This is Player right now, embedded inside Composer, so I can test my work. And using my touch screen, hopefully you can see that with 2 fingers. With 5 fingers, I'm manipulating this image, rotating it, resizing it, zooming it. It's automatically interactive. I didn't have to tell it to be interactive. I didn't have to write any code. I didn't have to care what screen I'm using. It just works. Now, I can constrain this. We'll talk about properties in more detail in a moment, but if I open up the properties panel for this image, this is a question I get a lot. Can I constrain this movement? Do I want to allow it to be moved, constrain the direction, allow rotation, allow resizing, maximum height, minimum height? You can constrain. By default, you can do whatever you want to it, but then you use the properties panel to configure it further and control how it reacts to the user, to the environment, or how it appears. So that's an image asset. We do support multiple asset types in Intuiface. So I click the Assets button in the blue ribbon up top. We have image assets, multiple formats. We have a video asset, multiple formats. YouTube asset, so you can embed a YouTube video. This is a popular request, so we built it for the product. Webcam. On Windows and Android devices, you can live stream the webcam, even take snapshots, like a photo booth, for example. Document asset. Word, PowerPoint, PDFs all can be embedded and enable people to browse through them. Web browser. You can embed a web browser in Intuiface and browse just about all of the web. It's HTML5, JavaScript, WebGL, it's all supported. Under the covers, it's a very recent version of the Chromium web rendering engine, so pretty much all websites, just about. Flash animation, it's a bit of a dying technology, but a lot of pre-existing content and skills. You can embed Flash in Intuiface on Windows, which is pretty much the only platform that runs Flash these days. 3D models, you can do multiple formats. Audio, so it's not visual, it's music, sound effects, background music. And then Microsoft Deep Zoom, which is a niche asset type that is very popular with archivists. They have very old, delicate artifacts that are being researched, so they take super high definition images of these artifacts, make them available digitally, so the originals are protected. We've had that since day one practically. So those are the different asset types, all of which can be combined in the same scene at the same time. If I just grab it from the toolbar, this is an empty container. Doesn't know what image it is yet, it's an image container. So there's a distinction between the container and the content. And what's interesting is that means you can assign content dynamically. And we'll talk about that later, but that's one of the beauties of Intuiface is you don't have to limit yourself to static content determined at design time. You can actually access and assign content at runtime. That's why we differentiate the notion of a container from the content you can put inside that container. You can assign it at runtime. That's a pretty cool thing. Let me go back to File Explorer. Here's a video. This is a WMV format. Here's a PDF. Let me drag that in as well. And let me grab 4 more images, drag those in, and I'll insert them individually, not as a collection. We'll talk about that in a moment. We'll insert individually, which means create an image wall. So now you know how to make an image wall in Intuiface with 3 strokes. Pretty easy, huh? So we have a book over here, so let me make that a little bigger, and we'll put the video over here, make that a little bigger, get this out of the way. Okay, play. So now I have 5 images, a video, and a book. So here's the video. Let me start that playing. So that's playing. I can manipulate this, right? It's multi-touch screen, multi-touch assets. That video is playing. Here's the book. Now I can move this around, resize and rotate, but if I pin this particular book, I'm turning pages. Now I have my 5 images, all of which interactive at the same time, and the video, and the book, and the images, and you get the idea. There's no limit to the number of touch points supported by Intuiface. If your touch screen supports 10 concurrent touch points, so does Intuiface. If the screen supports 64 concurrent touch points, so does Intuiface. If you have a multi-screen display wall, a 3x3 display wall, and each display supports 10 times 9, that's 90 touch points. Intuiface can support that as well. So that's determined by the hardware. Now, if I'm building an experience for a 12-inch iPad, it wouldn't even make sense to have more than 2 or 3 touch points on there, because how many hands can you get in a 12-inch screen? So the form factor will sometimes determine whether or not it even makes sense to anticipate multiple fingers, multiple hands. But in other scenarios, it's absolutely expected. Maybe I have a 1x3 display wall. It's 1 high, 3 wide, that almost exists to be used by multiple people, and that's perfectly okay. The other point, of course, is that you can have multiple different kinds of content in the same scene at the same time, and they can all be interactive. You can have a video running and interactive at the same time as somebody's reading a book and interacting with that, and as well as somebody's manipulating a bunch of images, or 3D models, or a web browser, or all the other asset types we support. Pretty powerful, and it's easy, right? I drag and drop and push play, right? It's not hard. Now you might be wondering about this background. So let's personalize that. See this image right here? Let me drag it in. This is a full HD image. My PC is 1920, has a 1920 by 1080 screen, 1920 pixels wide, 1080 pixels tall. This image is 1920 by 1080. When I created this project in Intuiface, I said this is for a 1920 by 1080 screen. So it creates a canvas that assumes 1920 by 1080. Let me right-click this image, set as background, and it perfectly fits the background of this scene. Nice and snug. This is what I mean by controlling every pixel of your design. With 2 clicks of my mouse, I've assigned an image to the background of the scene. It's not a solid color, it's not just white, it's your content. Maybe you built it in Photoshop. In fact, we natively support Photoshop files. If you drag and drop PSD files into Intuiface, it automatically converts all tagged layers into PNG files. So we're built to work side by side with Photoshop. And that background image can be whatever you want. It's got your brand marks, your aesthetic, your logos, whatever you want. I can also, by the way, if you look at the properties panel, it doesn't even have to be an image. Could be color, could be an image, could be a video. So you could have a full screen video looping in the background while having people interact with things in the foreground. On Windows, I can even make it transparent, if you can believe it. You can see through the background to any other third-party application and even interact with it at the same time that you're interacting with Intuiface. That's on Windows. It's pretty awesome, actually. Now, I can undo this. Maybe I change my mind. For this webinar, we'll stick with the white background, but you can see how easy that was. One other quick point, you'll see that some of these assets have controls on them. I can turn those on and off. One of the things the properties panel lets me do is turn these on and off. You can also personalize them. Under project settings, see me in the upper left, project settings is a notion of experience style. That allows me to choose from one of 3 pre-built styles or create my own. That allows me to have control over the controls. Next page, previous page, or play video, rewind, or whatever. So all the controls that you could optionally display for asset types, you have an influence over how they look. All right, asset experts, let's go a little deeper into collections. Here I have my 5 images that I dragged in originally. Whoops, I highlight all of them. So here's my 5 independent images. Remember, it was like an image wall. Let's make a collection. First, I'll right-click and add into a group. Lots of ways to make a collection. This is one way. This lets me create the group collection. Collections in Intuiface are similar to collections in PowerPoint. It lets me, for example, resize everything collectively with one use of the mouse, move them around collectively with one click of the mouse. At runtime, it would be 1 finger to move it, or 2 fingers, or as many fingers as you want to resize it. In Intuiface, I might use this to create a data sheet, where I have images and videos and documents, and I lay them out in a particular way so that it acts like a data sheet, but a data sheet that people can manipulate as a single entity. Probably not something you're using in the first hour. You know, there are other collections that might make more sense when you're first getting to know Intuiface. This little rabbit ear lets me open up sort of a quick properties panel. This is all of the properties, or I can right-click and say show properties. It opens up the big one. The rabbit ear lets me open up sort of a smaller one. One of the things I can change here in the quick properties panel for a collection is the collection type, the style. For example, let's do an asset grid. That's something you're more likely to use right away. It's rows and columns. Let me go to the properties panel for this asset grid and increase the item size. So 450, 450. We'll make this a little wider so you can see more stuff. And then I'll push play. So not too much configuration, just a teeny tiny bit. And then using one finger, I'm swiping through this gallery of images. You see that? It's not an image wall of 5 independent images. It's a collection of images that I can interact with a single finger. So again, it's like a gallery. That would be one way to use it. We have multiple collection types. You've seen the group. You've seen the asset grid. Another example would be an asset flow. The asset grid is rows and columns. We default to one row, multiple columns. But one thing about the asset grid is it's flat. There's no item of focus. The asset flow exists to give something focus. At real time, in edit mode, let's play with the visuals. Here's the wingspan. We'll make this a little bigger. Here's the aperture. Slide it out a little bit. And then in play mode, still it's with a single finger, but now rather than having that flat asset grid, there's always something in front. You see that? Another collection type, very popular, carousel. Let me play with the properties. Let's shallow up that view angle. Decrease the diameter a bit. There's a shadow. Let's hide the shadow. See, that clears up the shadows. So it's very configurable. Play. Using a single finger. Whee! Nice visual, huh? Isn't that nice? And how easy was that? Come on. Simple. I could stop the webinar right now and you could probably build something that would impress, your boss or your colleagues. But that's not all. Other collection types, circular panel, so it's a circle. Flip chart, one item at a time. The group you saw. Helix is like a strand of DNA. The map collection is too cool to just talk about. I'm going to show it to you, so give me a moment. Pinboard, it's like a scene within a scene. If I resize a group collection, I resize the items inside the group. If I resize a pinboard, I'm resizing the window to other items. So it does not affect the size of the content inside the pinboard. It affects the size of the window. It lets me embed scenes inside scenes. You can do some really funky things with pinboards. The scroll collection, it lets me produce effects like parallax or to show panoramic images. A panoramic image is a very wide image, and I might be swiping left, swiping left, swiping left, and the scroll collection allows me to scroll through the canvas containing that image. You can do some really amazing, build some amazing visuals using the scroll collection. Slideshow, that's the Ken Burns effect you might be familiar with. It's the slow pan and zoom on an image, then transition to new image. Pan and zoom on an image, then transition to new image. It's a visual. You're really not meant to interact with it. It's meant to attract attention or create a nice ambiance. And then the timeline collection, which is conceptually similar to the map. So let me explain the map and then you'll get the timeline, all right? So let me hide this, close this, go up to our blue ribbon. Here's the collections panel, and we have a map. So I'll drag in the map. Here we go. We support 2 map providers, Mapbox and Bing. Both of them require a token. Doesn't cost you any money, but you have to request one. I don't have one right now, so it says I have an invalid token. I need to get one. But don't blame us. It's what Mapbox and Bing requires, but it's easy to do, and it would hide this message. This is a live connection. We default to Mapbox. So when I'm zooming on this map with my mouse, I double-clicked on the map, and now I'm using my mouse wheel. This is live. We're not faking this. This isn't on my PC. I have a network connection, and I'm speaking right now to Mapbox's server, and it's serving up map tiles in real time. Could be satellite view, could be satellite with labels. We default to map view. Here we go. And we could do the same thing with Bing. And if I push play, you could do the same thing as well, but in this case it would be with your fingers. You could scroll the map and zoom in and zoom out and do whatever you want. Now that's pretty cool, right? To be able to interact with the map at runtime. It's already a neat feature. But remember, this is not an asset, it's a collection. That implies something, right? It implies I can put stuff in it. I can put stuff inside the map. For example, let me grab this classic point of interest icon. See, I'm right on the North Shore of Massachusetts. This is where I am right now, from home. The North Shore of Massachusetts in a little town called Rockport. So let me put this point of interest over Rockport. Nice. And let me drag the map and check it out. See that? The image moves with the map. It's geolocated. Items in the map collection have latitude, longitude coordinates. And as I zoom in and zoom out and move the map, it stays stuck to its assigned coordinate. That's amazing. I mean, if any of you write code, how long would it take you to build this thing, right? And how long did it take me? I mean, I know what I'm doing. It took, I don't know, 5 seconds? You could, for example, have a map with all your retail locations, all of your clients, all of your homes you've ever owned, I don't know. Whatever you want, you can decorate it with content. Content that can be interactive. Now, the beauty of collections is you can put anything you want in them. It doesn't have to just be images or just be videos. You can put images, videos, documents, 3D models, web browsers, all inside a collection. You can put collections inside of collections. I could put an asset grid inside the map. All of which can be interactive inside the collection. If I have a video in a collection, I can play it in the collection, or I can make it pop out and interact with it outside, and I'll show you that. So there's lots of ways to interact with that content and to make it presentable in a way that's engaging, that's interesting, and memorable. Isn't this amazing? The timeline collection is like the map, but instead of latitude and longitude, it's dates. If I put items in the timeline collection, I'm assigning a date, a year, a month, a day, and I can swipe through the years and zoom in and zoom out on centuries and on months and on days, or you get the idea. So the map is dimensionally speaking latitude, longitude. For the timeline, it's the date. Very easy, huh? Love my product. All right, collection experts, let's talk about properties. Here in the blue ribbon, content library. So here's a listing of all of the images, the videos, the documents that have already been used in this experience. The content library is global to the experience. For example, the same image might be in multiple scenes. So it would be listed here once because this is global to the experience. It enables me to access all of the content I'm using. I can even replace items. If I replace an image here, that replacement is propagated through the entire design. So there are some powerful features here. What I want to do is grab the images we worked with earlier and drag them into this scene. Notice the pop-up again, insert individually as a collection. Let's just make a collection. Click. So here I have a collection. Let me also grab the book and drag that in, the PDF. Okay. We'll start with the book. Now remember, when I ran this in play mode, it was a horizontal scroll. I was swiping left and right through the book, which is nice, but it's not the classic eye candy, that page-turning effect that you'll see on touchscreens. Well, guess what? Click, click, book. So with 2 clicks of the mouse, I've changed the style of this book to a more classic page-turning effect. Let's move it up here. We'll go into play mode in a moment. Here's my collection. You've seen me manipulate some of the properties. Let me add on just a couple other items to start. Tap item to open, click. Drag and drop item to open, click. See that? Play. First, we'll look at the book. It's still a multi-touch screen, and I can manipulate that book as I wish. But grab the top of the page, and I'm turning it. Isn't that nice? Everybody loves that effect. This is a PDF, guys. This is not some magic format that we require to use. Just add a PDF, and this works. Here's my asset grid. You remember that. I'm going to tap Beetlejuice. Watch this. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Tap item to open. It popped out a copy. Could be a video, could be a web browser, could be a 3D model, could be a map, could be any collection, right? Just pop it out. Here's Edward Scissorhands. 1, 2, 3, drag and drop. Drag and drop item to open. How easy is that? couple other things about properties. You've been exposed to them quite a bit. You get the idea. But let's look at one other thing. I'd mentioned before, the intent is to really work side by side with something like a Photoshop. You know, it's your content, it's your graphics, and so who's building that? So somebody somewhere is probably using a graphic design tool. Intuiface does not exist to replace it. It's meant to supplement it. We do, however, have some basic effects, and you can see them listed here. For example, see opacity? I'm going to drop opacity. Take a look at this collection while I drop opacity. Down, 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 down. See that? I can change its opacity, blur, grayscale, sepia, hue, brightness. So there are some visual aspects I can control through properties, and via something called triggers and actions, I can even animate changes in these properties. I can slowly fade something out of view or slowly increase its brightness or whatever. Or do it fast. Doesn't have to be slowly, but you get the idea. So the properties let me control multiple aspects of the design and of the visuals, and that can even be animated. So that's properties. Let's go on to triggers and actions. So one of the really cool aspects of Intuiface is this ability to react to the user, to react to the environment. Essentially, it's when this happens, then do that. When X happens, then do Y. When then. That's triggers and actions, a when then. To illustrate it, we'll start with a button. So let me drag in a button. Buttons exist to make things happen, right? That's why there's a button. If I touch it, it makes something happen. That's why we have a button. This defaults to what we call a simple button. So simple buttons can be configured in simple ways. So for example, I can fill it with a red color. Well, let's go to the All Properties panel, text. We can say the text is press me, press me, and the font color is white. So simple things. We do also have what's called an image button. If you look at the Properties panel, notice an image button has two associated images, a pressed image and a released image. What does it look like when it's being touched? What does it look like when it's not being touched? In this case, it acts like a button, but it doesn't look like a button. It just looks like your image. But it's still interactive. For this little demo, we'll stick with the simple one. So here's a button that does absolutely nothing, right? It has no purpose in life. So let's give it a purpose in life. I could click the lightning bolt up here. That opens up the listing of existing triggers and actions for this button. Currently, there's none. It's empty. Well, let's add a trigger. Okay. When the press me button is pressed and released, then do something. When, then. I choose the when, then I choose the then. We default for buttons, we default to is released. For example, we could choose is pressed. We default to is released because it lets people change their mind. You may have noticed that in a web browser, if you click a link with your mouse but drag your mouse off the link before letting go of the mouse button, the web browser ignores the click because it's waiting for the release. It's the same thing here. If we did is pressed, the instant your finger or mouse touched the button, it would launch the action or set of actions. And we want to give people a chance to change their mind. So when the button is pressed and released, then what? Then scene-to-scene navigation, go to the scene named Properties. That's how you do navigation in Intuiface. You call a navigation action. Any trigger can call any action. By the way, there's over 200 triggers in Intuiface and over 200 actions in Intuiface. Yeah, really. It's that broad and deep. Let me show you this. All right, so when the button is pressed to release, then go to the scene name Properties. Fair enough. Let's see if this works. 1, 2, 3, press me, and now we're in the scene name Properties. Anything has associated triggers and associated actions. So for example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to swipe my finger on the scene itself, not on the asset grid, not in the book, just on the background. I'm going to swipe my finger from the right to the left. 1, 2, 3, swipe. And now I'm back on the triggers and actions page. How is that possible? Everything has triggers and actions. Even the scene itself has triggers and actions. Let's look at the scene itself. I'm using my mouse to click the scene itself. If you look at the scene structure panel, it's the scene itself, nothing inside it. If I open up the triggers and actions panel, see? There's already 2 trigger and action pairs associated with the scene. Gesture detected swipe left and gesture detected swipe right. First of all, yes, Intuiface can recognize on-screen gestures, swipes and swirls and circles and shapes. That can be a trigger, and it can call any action. In this case, it calls the next action, which actually cares about the order of the scenes in the scenes panel. It's a rare instance where we're actually using the scenes order. But you also saw that I could specify any scene that I wanted to. Some triggers are global. Tapped is a global trigger. I don't have to use a button. I could just have an image with a tapped trigger or a video with a tapped trigger, and it would act like a button. Other triggers are pretty specific. When video is played is a trigger, but only for the video. Actions, some are global, like hide and show. Pretty much everything is a hide and show action. Anything can be hidden or shown. Some actions are very specific, like go to the URL cnn.com. Well, that's really only for a web browser. Huge variety of triggers and actions. You can combine them any way you wish. And by the way, one trigger can call multiple actions. It can do multiple things. When this button is touched, do this and this and this and this and this. You can call multiple actions. Here's one more example of an action that people desire, which is to reset an experience in a public place. Very often you might be using Intuiface to create signage, something in a hallway, in a store, in wherever. You don't want it to get stuck on a random scene. When somebody's done using it, they're not going to reset it for you likely. They're going to walk away. So how do you make it reset? Well, what we tell you to do is to create an inactivity timer. So let's do that. I'm going to right-click the scene itself and say add a trigger. This case will be a timer, specifically an inactivity timer of 3 seconds. When nothing has happened for 3 seconds, then scene-to-scene navigation, go to the scene named properties. See if it works. Play. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, there we go. Now, of course, 3 seconds is ridiculous, right? If you have a 5-minute video, your inactivity timer should be at least 5 minutes and 1 second. So you need to pick a time that makes sense, but pick a time that makes sense. And that way, you can ensure your experience is never stuck on a random scene, that at some point it will reset itself and go back to the attract loop that you've designed to attract attention, whatever that might be. I'd mentioned that animation exists in the product, and that's an aspect of an action. So one of the things you can do with actions is animate them. To illustrate that point, let's go to the next topic, design accelerators. That's this button, the blue ribbon. Let me click that. This is pre-built content we've created for you to accelerate your ability to create really interesting visuals. These are all free. Now, when you first install Composer, you'll have, I don't know, I think 6 bundles. I have obviously way more than 6 bundles. What you do is click Get More Accelerators, click, and then this panel would let you download all the bundles we've provided for you. All of them are free. So there's some mini games, pre-built button designs, email forms, background images, lots of stuff here. Item pickers and sound effects, lots of stuff. It's all free. Just click it, download it, it's yours. You can use it in your experience as is. And these aren't just images or just videos. They're pre-configured with triggers and actions. So for example, if I grab one of these buttons, like next and previous buttons, they'll already be pre-configured with the go to the next scene, go to the previous scene. You can change it, but they're pre-configured. In fact, some of these are full scenes, decorated with lots of different content. So a design accelerator can be about anything, and I'm going into some detail because paid feature alert. If you have a Composer Enterprise license, you can create your own design accelerator. So you can be working in multiple projects and reuse content across multiple projects. Just drag it in from the Design Accelerators panel. But everything you see here is free. Let's go to touch gesture icons. So let me open this up. Picture's worth 1,000 words. You don't want it to take an hour for somebody to understand what to do with your content. Ideally, there are visuals that make it pretty quickly clear for them what they need to do. And these are classic ways to illustrate that by having fingers, saying tap here or whatever. So let me drag in the very first one. It's called animated double tap black. It's animated. So here I am in edit mode. And all right, I mean, it's not doing anything, but it says it's animated. Let's go play. Check it out. Aha. See this? It's getting big and small. It's growing bigger and smaller. It's saying double tap here. So it's attracting my attention. If this was in the corner of the screen, my eye would be drawn to it because it's moving, and it's saying double tap here. Okay, good. So apparently you can animate it in Intuiface. We just saw it. The question is how. Let's go to the scene structure panel. It's just an image. That's all it is. So it's really not clear how to animate it, but it does have this lightning bolt. See the lightning bolt? That means there's an associated trigger action pair. If I hover my mouse over the lightning bolt, it shows me what that is. If I click on the trigger, it opens it up. So let's check it out. Apparently there's a timer on this image. When the timer has elapsed 0.1 seconds, in other words, the instant this image becomes visible, because maybe it wasn't, the instant this image becomes visible, then resize what? So it's resize itself. Resize by a factor of 1.5. So after a timer associated with the image, the instant the image becomes available, then resize that same image by a factor of 1.5. Well, that's unsatisfying because it still doesn't tell me how to animate it. What this is going to do is make it bigger by 150% and then stop. See, show timing and animation? Click. Aha, there it is. So don't just resize it. Animate the resizing. It should take 3 seconds. It should have this performance profile. It should repeat indefinitely, and when it reverses, it should animate the reversal, not jump to the start. I'm not looking to make you guys experts of animation. I want you to know where it is so you can play with it. But you get the idea. You can not just change the value of a property, but animate the change of that property value. Pretty much any property representing a range of values can be animated through that range of values. It could be x and y coordinates, could be width and height, could be rotational angle, it could be the size of an item, could be visibility, because visibility is essentially opacity, right? So you can animate your way. Any property representing a range of values can be animated through that range, and that's how you access it. If I have multiple actions, so I have a single trigger, look up here, see add action, I can have multiple actions, I told you that. If they're all animated, I can use this little timeline here to work it all out, to work out that timing. This happens first, this happens second, this takes 2 seconds, this takes 1 second. So I can choreograph the animation across multiple actions to make sure they occur in the right order. You can't break Intuiface. If this is interesting to you, play with it. Try it out. So that's design accelerators, and thanks to them, animation. All right, DA experts, let's go to interface assets and binding. This topic is so amazing, it could have its own webinar. And in fact, it sort of does. So there are 2 other webinars, one of which is about working with external data sources, and that relies on interface assets. The webinar is about Excel, but we can work with any external data source, business logic, or device. Thanks to interface assets, Intuiface can communicate with any external data source, business logic, or device. Remember back at the beginning I said that an image asset is a container and the content, and I can assign content dynamically? Often it would be, not the only way, but often it would be through interface assets, because interface assets are pointing to some external resource, and it could be grabbing, for example, an image from that external resource at runtime and assigning it to an image asset. It's amazingly powerful. In fact, if you know what an API is, we can work with any API on the planet if it's accessible, and we can speak to it using REST-based web services, JavaScript or .NET, then we can communicate with that API, period. Moving information in or taking it out. So it's bidirectional. It can even be a trigger source. The trigger could be in that outside thing. It causes things to happen in Intuiface. There could be a trigger in Intuiface and it causes things to happen in that outside thing. It becomes an extension of your experience. We even have people using Intuiface to turn on the room lights, to close the window shades. How? Because the room lights and the shades have a controller. The controller has an API. We talk to it. all through the magic of interface assets. It's amazing what you can do with Intuiface. You can build retail point of sale with Intuiface, an endless aisle catalog, enable me to browse all the things we have for sale with the latest price, not the price when I designed it, the latest availability, not the availability when I designed it, right? That information has to be accurate in real time, and you can build that with Intuiface. If I click this button in the blue ribbon, it enables me to access all of the pre-built interface assets. So in fact, there's a whole bunch available out of the box. For example, data tracking, a topic so interesting and so powerful, there's a webinar about it. All about data tracking. The beauty of interactive content is you know what people are interested in because they touched it. This makes interactive content a rich resource for learning about the preferences and opinions and desires of your target audience. And because interface assets enable Intuiface to access any information through any API, the context you can bring to an interaction is enormous. You don't just know what they touched, you might know who they are, their gender, their age, the weather outside, and the movie playing down the street. And all of that gives context to the thing they picked. All of that can be saved by Intuiface thanks to the data tracking interface asset. We work with beacons out of the box. We can broadcast Eddystone URL beacon. We can see iBeacon and Eddystone protocol. All of this thanks to interface assets. We can extract information about a device, its tablet orientation, its location based on IP address. Why would you want to do that? Because it might affect the visuals. If I'm in portrait orientation, then do this on a tablet. If I'm in Rockport, Massachusetts, then show this. So you're reacting to the environment to make certain things happen. Excel, I mentioned we work with Excel. This is out of the box. It's the poor man's database. That's the beauty of Excel. It's a very simple database. So for example, rather than having 50 scenes with the same layout and different content, I could have one scene with a template that dynamically pulls content out of the spreadsheet, one row at a time, or you pick the row based on filters. That's why we have a webinar about Excel, because it's so powerful for Intuiface. Here we have geocoding, turning address into coordinates and vice versa because of the awesome map collection we have. Here we're playing with the Harvard Art Museum API, so this is not something we publish, but we're playing with things, and any API, guys, anything. The Philips Hue light bulb, it's on the internet, it has an IP address, it has an API, we can talk to it. Out of the box, turn it on, turn it off, change colors, make it flash. QR code generation, send emails from Intuiface, save content to the local file system or USB key, run a Flickr search, show a blog, show a Twitter feed, runtime, all this at runtime. On Windows, speech recognition and text-to-speech. How awesome is that? This would be great, for example, for accessibility. Maybe people don't see too well, they don't hear too well, and so you enable these additional features to make your content accessible. Now a little more advanced, now maybe timers, clocks, a scheduler. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 o'clock, do this bunch of stuff. This is sort of extending Intuiface now with a little bit of logic. Global variables, random number generation, text manipulation, value comparison, things that you may not need on day one, but in day three you're like, you know what, I would like a random number generator, and we built it for you. And local weather. So let me show you some pre-built ones in action. Remember, you can build them yourself. But let me show you some we have, and we'll do Twitter too because people love that. So here we go. We have two interface assets added to my experience. Whoops. The Twitter feed and local weather. I can drag and drop these right into my scene, and they create what we call a default template. It's a visual showing you what's accessible through this interface asset. You don't have to use this visual. If I open the scene structure panel, you can see it's just image assets, the text assets. I mean, it's just the basic building blocks of Intuiface. You can completely explode this and reorder it and change the colors and change the fonts and change the do whatever you want. This is just the default, so you have something to play with. It's the same for Twitter. If I drag this in, this is the default data template, so you have something to stare at. So here we have the weather in London, and here we have Twitter. We're not faking this weather. There's a third party called Open Weather Online. They have a REST-based API enabling you for free to get the weather for any location on the planet. I don't know why they do it. They're nice people, right? Well, you could pay for other things too, but for free you can get some weather information. This is the weather in London. If I open up the properties panel for weather, here's location London. Let me put my location. That's Rockport, so we'll use my zip code. And look, it updated. It is 47 degrees and sunny in Rockport right now. I can do the same thing for Twitter. If I go to tweet list, open up the properties for this, changes to @IBM. Now I'm getting, watch it, refreshes dynamically. This is IBM's feed. See that? Play. Under the covers, it's the basic building blocks you've seen: image asset, video asset, text asset, collections, group collection, asset grid, asset flow. That's all this is. But the content is accessed dynamically. See this? This is all dynamic. You can change values at runtime. See my zip code up there? If I touch that field, it opens up the on-screen keyboard. I can put Paris, enter, and now we have the weather in Paris. It's a little nicer in Rockport right now. Here's my IBM feed. I could construct it so that I can change the search query on the fly. The default template doesn't do that. But watch this eye candy. You see this image in the tweet? 1, 2, 3, tap. Ah, that's pretty awesome. That's a real scary image, but that's pretty awesome. So even though this content is being accessed dynamically, you can still manipulate it as if it was static content. Simple, simple, simple. And you can build your own interface assets for any API. Paid feature alert, you do need a Composer Enterprise license to do that. So with Composer Free and Composer Pro, you can use all the out-of-the-box interface assets. You want to build your own for your own back-office system for some third-party API that we don't support out of the box? Be my guest, but you do need a Composer Enterprise license to do it. So that's interface assets. You might wonder why it's called interface assets and binding. So let me explain binding a little bit. Binding is the glue. Now remember, like this weather, this information isn't here, it's coming from outside of my PC. So somehow I'm mapping the information from that third-party web service and assigning it to an asset here in my experience. Let's see, so this is current weather Fahrenheit. See that? So this 47 number, this number 47 is in this text asset. Let's open the properties panel for this text asset. So I can right-click and say Show Properties. See how it's fuchsia? See that? Is that fuchsia? I'm not sure what color that is. That means that number 47 is not assigned here. It's coming from someplace else. It's bound to a source. If I click it, it shows me that the source is the local weather interface asset, this property called temperature Fahrenheit. So the API exposed by the third-party web service has a property called temperature Fahrenheit, and I'm mapping that source value to this text asset in Intuiface. That's binding. Very powerful. In fact, see this little seashell-looking thing? Not only can I bind an asset in Intuiface or a collection in Intuiface to a source, but I can manipulate that content before assigning it. That's called a binding converter. I do something to the source value before I assign it to the target. It's very unlikely you're doing this on day one. Don't worry about it. I just want you to know it exists. I want to just further illustrate the notion of binding to really lock in the idea by doing something a bit simpler. So let's not use an interface asset. I'll move this over to the side. You see this logo? If I click the logo and open up the properties panel, you now are familiar with the idea. This is coming from somewhere. The X and Y coordinate of that image is not here. It's coming from somewhere. Let's see where. It's coming from the logo on the introduction scene. It's coming from the logo on a completely different scene. It's on the introduction scene, which means if I move the logo on the introduction scene, it will be moved here as well. Don't believe me? Let's try it out. Here's the introduction scene. Here's my logo. Let's move it down. Then go back to the interface asset scene. And oh, would you look at that? The logo's on the bottom. So that teaches you two things. One, binding can be between things in the same experience. It doesn't require interface assets. It could be two properties in the same experience. And it's in real time, even at design time. lots of aspects to Intuiface that enable you to achieve really engaging, modern visuals without a lot of work. I mean, this is not hard. That's all the basics. Now, I want to touch on a couple other items, assuming you finish an experience. But let me do this first. If I open up the Experiences panel, this is the thing you see when you first run Intuiface. This Marketplace tab, you see Marketplace? These are all of the pre-built samples we've created for you and experiences created by customers for sale or for free. If you filter by free, so I can filter by free, this is only showing me the content that's free. You can see all of the experiences we've created for you. Download it for free, see how we built it, take it apart, steal from it. And the beauty is it shows you this is way more than bullet points on a slide. An in-store shopping catalog, museum exhibition, company sales pitch, restaurant menu, concierge kiosk, completely different contexts, all using the same basic building blocks to tell an interesting story. So this demo showed you the building blocks. One of the next things you could do is download these samples. Check them out, see how we build them, and be inspired to come up with interesting visuals. Well, let's say you've built your own interesting visual, right? You want to share it with a colleague, you want to maybe deploy it to players in the field. The first thing you would do is publish them. Now in Windows, you could copy, literally go into File Explorer, copy the project, put in a USB key, walk it over someplace else, put it on a device, have player run it. I mean, you could do that, but it's vastly simpler if you use our publish, share, and deploy capability. So publishing means to put a copy into the cloud. In Composer, that's File, Publish. See it? If you build an experience and you select Publish, then we will by default use the storage we provide you for free, called Intuiface Cloud Storage. Under the covers, that's Amazon S3. It's not a server that we host. You're using Amazon S3, so very scalable, very reliable. The amount of storage space you have is determined by the Composer license you have. The higher edition Composer, the more free space you have, but everybody has some free space. And if you don't tell us where to put it, we put it in Intuiface Cloud Storage. You could choose your own Amazon S3 buckets, they call them buckets. You could choose your own FTP, FTPS site, or you use our Intuiface Cloud Storage. Again, the point of publishing is to put a copy of your experience in the cloud, making it network accessible, which is helpful because then you can share and deploy it. Okay? So if I open up Management Console, so this is my account, so let me open up Management Console. When you have an Intuiface account, you have access to the My Intuiface website. You can think of it as a dashboard with a lot of capability. Here are all of the experiences for my account that either I published or that were published by someone else and shared with me. For example, I published this template earlier, and here's information about the template. So the thing that I used for this webinar, I wanted to share with a colleague. So here, this was published from Composer. It's now available in Management Console, and using a web browser, I can, for example, see this, create a URL. Click. This URL can be given to anyone anywhere on the planet, and if they put it into a web browser on any of the platforms we support, it will automate as best as the platform allows the installation of player and execution of that experience in play mode only. So you don't edit with share by URL. This is for playback only. Anywhere in the world, any web browser, any platform we support, you put in this URL, it'll run the experience. Now be careful, we have hardware minimums. If you put this URL on a lousy PC, you're going to get lousy performance, right? But assuming you have a decent quality tablet, PC, what have you, that's how you would share it with somebody that doesn't know what Intuiface is, they don't install software, great. Now, as I said, it depends on the platform. On Windows, we automate everything. On the iPad, for example, Apple prevents third parties from automatically installing apps. So we show a page that says, please go to the store, install it, add the Intuiface Player app, then come back to this window, and so it's a little more interactive just because that's what the platform allows. Let me stop sharing. Yes. You could also share it with people. So this is my colleague Seb Monnier, the gentleman monitoring this webinar, answering your questions. You could put any email addresses in here and share it. You can always share with a read-only version. That's what reader means. You're sharing a read-only version, so if somebody else downloads it on their machine, they're downloading a copy. Paid feature alert. If I have Composer Enterprise, I can also share as a writer, which means sharing the master. They're not saving a copy, they're making changes to the original. So it's a good way to collaborate. And I can have as many email addresses as I want, and an email is sent out to people saying, hey, Jeff just shared something with you. Okay? So that's how sharing works. Then there's deployment. Last paid feature alert. Anybody can share. You need Composer Enterprise to remotely deploy. So remote deployment means I'm not in the same room, the same town, the same country, and I'm able to tell player, hey, player over there, go run this thing. That's a remote deployment. I'm not standing at the device running player. I'm remote to that device. How does it work? Here's all of my players in the field. In this case, I have 3. I could have 1,000. Each one of them could be tagged. Each player can be tagged with anything I want. So, for example, maybe I'm in Boston, but I can tag it with any set of tags that I want, and I can then filter based on those tags, like only show me the ones in Boston, and it doesn't recognize the, I didn't enter it in the device. But this represents all of the items that are proper, that satisfy my filter, then it's a drag and drop. And that's deployment. It's as simple as that. I could have 1,000 devices, filter them based on tags. There's now 20 devices that satisfy that filter, drag and drop. And all of those devices in the field will start running that experience. Whether it's Windows, iPad, Android, Chrome, all the devices we support, you can do remote deployment. Isn't that simple? Easy. All right, other topics. We only lightly touched on data tracking. We have a webinar dedicated to it. The same page you used to register for this webinar, you can watch the recording of or register for the next data tracking webinar. With Composer, you can create an unlimited number of data points. You don't have to spend a dime to work with the data tracking feature and figure out how to use it. You would not just use it, by the way, to understand your audience. You would also use it to evaluate your own design. But very often, if you're creating interactive content in a public place, there's a call to action. There's a reason you did it. You want to make sure they're doing A, B, and C. Are they doing A, B, and C? Wouldn't that be good to know? So for a pilot, you might use the data tracking feature to see, well, what are people actually doing? And if they're not doing what you want, you need to revisit your design, right? Or the location of the kiosk. I mean, all the variables that can, the size of the screen and everything, right? Data tracking will help you evaluate that. We kind of really only focused on Windows, but from a player perspective, everything I build in Composer can run on any of these platforms, all of them, iPad, Android, etc. Content import. I mentioned this, for example. You can drag and drop Photoshop files and they work. Drag and drop PDFs, PowerPoint, Excel. All of these different things are natively understood by Intuiface and can be incorporated in a meaningful way for your visuals. Remote control. Intuiface has a remote control, believe it or not. If your experience is running on a Windows PC, you can remotely control that experience using an iPad or Android tablet. You go to Google Play or the Apple App Store, you install Intuipad, that's the remote control, it's free. And the Windows PC is on the same network as your tablet, you can then run a remote control on that tablet to remotely control the content on the Windows PC. I might do that, for example, because I'm at a conference and I hook up my laptop to a projector so the room sees what's on screen in that projector. I'm not touching the wall, but I could walk around the audience with my tablet in hand. So to be right up front with all of my audience members and still remotely control that experience. Scheduling, I did touch on that very briefly. The idea is it's like day parting, for example. You specify a time interval, a frequency, and you can make things happen. It's just another trigger. It's a schedule trigger to do whatever actions you want. It could be changing content, changing scenes, refreshing things, whatever you want. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 o'clock do this, at 6 o'clock do that. And remote actions. To this point, the trigger and actions have been in the experience. If there's a button and then a change of scene, right? So the trigger and the action are in the same experience. I did mention briefly, if you caught it, the trigger could be in an interface, something outside in the action in Intuiface or vice versa. Well, that's remote, right? So the trigger is causing an action out there, or a trigger out there is causing an action here. You could even have two experiences talking to each other. The trigger could be in experience A and the action in experience B, C, D, E, and F. Those are remote actions. It does not have to be in the same experience. So I have to believe Intuiface is doing way more than you expected, right? There's a lot going on here, but it's not hard. It takes a little time. Got to spend time with it. Now, your next steps. You did the smart thing. You watched this webinar. Okay? I mean, this is the best first step. If it's not your first step, thank you for deciding to come here. It was a smart move because you got to see all the building blocks, see how it comes together. You have an idea of how it works. That was the right first step. Beyond that, there are many other things you could do, and that was all on our resources page. Let me open up our website. Go to resources. You are here in order to register for the webinar, but look at all of the other content that's available. Over 200 articles in an online library. It has an excellent search engine. It also has a multi-stage tutorial. That tutorial might be the best second thing you do because it forces you to get your hands dirty. There is a user community, so you don't have to talk to us. You can talk to third parties about how they're using it, what they built, get their advice. The marketplace, I showed you the marketplace. That's all those free pre-built samples. But we also have customer selling content. So maybe somebody built something, you say, I just want that, rather than having to rebuild it, and you can pay for that. Support. We do offer support. Through forums, we have a support team, a lot smarter than me about this product, who can answer all your questions, and the turnaround time is, you're never waiting more than a business day. You're either getting an answer the same day or tomorrow. That's it. Lots of other videos are available, many of which are in the online docs. Some are also on the website itself. Just click this link. We have experts. So if you want to pay a third party to do the whole job for you, we have identified a set of companies around the world who have the skills in Intuiface and design capability to, aesthetics, to create content for you. And remember, it is a global world. They don't have to be in the same city for you to work with them, so don't bias yourself geographically. We do also finally offer a small set of services. We're not a services company. We exist. Intuilab exists to build, sell, and support Intuiface. But there are some small services we created because there are some needs. So for example, Bootstrap. It's a teach you to fish service. The idea is you give us your design concept and we build a template based on that design and then train you in ways to finish the job. We teach you how to finish it. So it's not full service, it's a teach you to fish service. We start it and teach you how to finish it. Another example of a service might be interface assets. You need an interface asset, you don't have the skill, you don't have the time, okay, you could hire us for that. If you want full service, then you'd be going to one of the experts. Okay, the whirlwind is over. Hopefully you're excited. I mean, you can tell I love my product. I mean, hopefully you're feeling better about it and excited to get to work. Lots of things you can do to get started. I'm going to turn this on over to Sebastian, see if there are any questions, and then open up the floor to questions. So all of you can ask them right now if you want.